A week before my wedding, my stepsister ran off with my fiancé. Not only did she steal the man I was supposed to marry, but she and Greg had the audacity to send me taunting postcards for months afterward. And now? Now she has the nerve to ask for my help. For years ago, I was engaged to my college sweetheart. Greg and I had been together all through school, and at 23, we thought we had our whole lives ahead of us. A perfect love story, or so I believed. We had been engaged for a year, and everything was set. The dress. The venue. The flowers. Then, just 1 week before we were supposed to say, "I do," Greg vanished. No calls. No explanation. Just a letter. In that letter, Greg confessed that he had been having an affair with my stepsister, Melissa. It started a few months after our engagement. He claimed he couldn't go through with marrying me because it would be unfair to all of us, himself, Melissa, and me. As if he was doing me some kind of favor. He wrote that he believed the universe had used me as a stepping stone, guiding him toward his true love. As if I was just a placeholder. And then, they were gone. Greg's parents, humiliated by their son's betrayal, took care of all the wedding expenses. They never spoke to me again after that. My family, however, was outraged. My father, who is actually my stepfather but the only dad I've ever known, was livid. He even considered hiring a private investigator to track them down and drag them back for answers. My mother tried to talk him out of it, but I could see the fire in his eyes. He had raised me as his own since I was 8, after my biological father abandoned us before I could even remember him. Melissa and I had never been close. We met when our parents married, but from the start, she made it clear that she didn't like me. Hate might not even be a strong enough word. She made my school years a living hell, constantly belittling me, turning people against me, finding new ways to humiliate me. Even when we were home, she never let up. My parents tried to stop her, but nothing worked. She wasn't afraid of them, their punishments, or their threats. She did as she pleased. Unlike me, Melissa had no mother. Her mom had died when she was still a baby, an epileptic episode in the middle of the night. Anytime my mother tried to discipline her, Melissa threw it back in her face. "You're not my real mom. You have no right." My father tried to put his foot down, but she didn't listen to him either. She was fearless and reckless. By middle school, she had picked up bad habits, smoking, sneaking out, drinking with the worst kinds of people. And then came the night she got arrested. She and her so-called friends had broken into someone's house while drunk. That was the final straw. My father gave her an ultimatum: get help or get out. She fought it, of course, begged, protested, raged. But for the first time, my father didn't back down. She was sent away to a rehab program for troubled teens and stayed there until after high school. During those years, my parents visited her often, but I didn't. I wanted nothing to do with her. And in her absence, my life got better. Without Melissa and her minions making my existence miserable, high school was suddenly bearable. When she finally came back, she did something I never expected. She apologized. She looked me in the eye and said she was sorry for everything. And for a moment, I believed her. I let my guard down, thinking maybe she had changed. We were both about to start college. Life was moving forward. And even though we were never close, she at least stopped tormenting me. Instead of cruelty, I got indifference. And honestly, that was enough for me. My parents saw this shift too, but they didn't push us to act like real sisters. They knew better than to force something that wasn't there. Then, I met Greg. He was charming, sweet, everything I had ever wanted. We dated for a year before I brought him home for Thanksgiving. That night, I saw something unusual: Melissa actually engaging in conversation. She was listening, laughing, even getting along with Greg. For someone who never showed interest in family gatherings, it was strange. Then, she did something even stranger. She started reaching out to me. Texting me. Talking to me. Trying to be a friend. For the first time in our lives, she wanted to be close to me. I didn't know why. And I had no idea what she was planning. And #X20, rewrite the provided video transcript section into a fully immersive and engaging narrative. Ensure every sentence is rewritten without skipping, summarizing, or merging any ideas, maintaining the original script's word count as closely as possible. Use a mix of sentence structures, short impactful lines, rhetorical questions, vivid descriptions to bring emotions, suspense, and vivid imagery to life. Match the pacing of the original, layering details to build anticipation. Avoid including the competitor's name, or any channel-specific details, replacing such references with neutral terms if necessary. The final rewrite should transform the script creatively while preserving its depth and completeness. If the last sentence of the section is incomplete, skip it and begin the next input with the start of the next part. Again, note man full video transcript thori copy paste karo ga make sure achasa read car ka above input ka relevant next output deni hi kasi beaches ka mx nhi karna hi agar kasi chis ki samaj nhi ida poch lana hi script main kasi type ki koi galati nahi honi chaya. Note again, don't read channel intro or outro. A nagging suspicion gnawed at me, whispering doubts I couldn't silence. Was Melissa only trying to befriend me because of Greg? I needed to know. So, one day, I asked her outright, my voice laced with paranoia. She laughed, shaking her head, assuring me that wasn't the case. But then she revealed something that caught me off guard. At our very first dinner together, Greg had spoken about how strong his bond was with his siblings. That moment, she admitted, made her rethink everything, the way she had treated me, the way she had distanced herself for so long. It had nothing to do with Greg in the way I had feared, but he had unknowingly been the catalyst. He had forced her to confront her past, to reconsider her behavior toward me. She confessed that, for years, she had blamed me for being sent away. The resentment festered inside her like a wound that wouldn't heal. But time had shown her the truth. It wasn't my fault. Her own reckless actions had led to her exile. She had come to terms with it, and now, she wanted to make things right. She wanted to be part of the family again, and that wouldn't happen unless she truly apologized from the depths of her heart and worked to mend our broken relationship. I've always been an emotional fool. Her words hit me like a tidal wave, breaking down every wall I had built. I forgave her. Like an idiot, I let her back in. I let her become my friend. And that's what hurt the most, because she betrayed me. For a long time, things seemed good. Not perfect, but better. She was involved in my wedding preparations, showing up, offering help, weaving herself into my life in a way that felt real. We weren't best friends, but we weren't enemies either. We met up regularly, at least once or twice a month, sharing conversations that felt genuine. By the time I got engaged, she had met Greg in person. They had been in the same room, at family gatherings, behaving exactly as they should. There was no awkwardness, no strange chemistry. Nothing that set off any alarms. Even after the engagement, there was no sign, no slip, no stolen glance, no hesitation that hinted at what they were doing behind my back. Greg played his part masterfully. He wore the mask of a devoted fiancé, never once letting it slip. And Melissa? She was just as convincing. She smiled, she laughed, she pretended to be my friend. I had no reason to suspect a thing. No reason to believe that, all along, they were lying to me. The truth only surfaced when it was too late, when they were already gone. My parents were furious. They wanted to track them down, drag them back, demand answers. But I stopped them. I had nothing left to give. I just wanted to forget. The humiliation, the heartbreak, it was enough. They had made a fool of me, run away just a week before my wedding, and I refused to invite any more drama into my life. I was done. In the aftermath, I shut down. My days became a blur of work and sleep. I buried my emotions, refused to confront them, let numbness take over. But the worst was yet to come. A couple of weeks after my supposed wedding day, a postcard arrived. My hands trembled as I opened it, my breath catching in my throat. It was from Melissa. She was in California. But that wasn't the worst part. Inside the envelope were photos, pictures of her and Greg, arms wrapped around each other, beaming with happiness. A twisted, cruel display of what they had done to me. And as if that wasn't enough, she had the audacity to write that she was sorry about the surprise before the wedding. But I knew better. She wasn't sorry. Not even a little. It was a game to her. A sick, calculated move meant to shatter me further. That's when it hit me, she had never truly forgiven me for what happened years ago. She still blamed me. She had never wanted to be my friend. She had used me. manipulated me, played the long game, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And I had fallen right into her trap. For days, I couldn't sleep. My mind spun, replaying every moment, every conversation, every detail I had missed. The betrayal consumed me, ate away at my sanity. I had to get therapy just to process the damage she had inflicted. But it didn't stop there. The postcards kept coming. Month after month, more photos, more reminders of what she had done. She wanted a reaction. She wanted to know that she had broken me. But I refused to give her that satisfaction. I never responded. I never played her game. And after nearly a year of silence on my end, she finally gave up. Our parents were devastated. The hurt ran deep, and they made their choice. They cut ties with her completely. No more reaching out, no more second chances. And it was a loss that Melissa never saw coming. She had been poised to inherit our father's business, had worked toward it her entire life. But after what she did, our father wanted nothing to do with her. Instead, he turned to me. He felt guilty, felt like he had to make things right in some way. So, he asked me to take over instead. The problem? I wasn't prepared. I had no business degree, no experience, nothing that made me qualified to step into his shoes. I was a history major. My world revolved around the past, not the cutthroat nature of business. But he insisted. He would teach me. He would give me everything I needed to succeed. And so, I agreed. I worked tirelessly, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. Years of effort, late nights, endless challenges. And last year, it finally happened. I was promoted. My father retired. The company was mine. And for the first time in years, life felt stable. Secure. I had built something from nothing, risen from the ashes of my betrayal, and come out stronger. My parents finally had the freedom to enjoy life without worrying about the company. And Greg? Melissa? There were nothing more than ghosts from a past I no longer cared to remember. Work kept me occupied, therapy healed my wounds, and slowly, I moved forward. I refused to let them have any more space in my life. They had stolen enough. And now? Now, I was finally free. I never imagined I'd hear from them again. Not after what they did to me. Not after the humiliation, the betrayal, the audacity. I had moved on, erased them from my thoughts like a bad dream. And yet, here they were, crawling back, as if they still had the right to ask me for anything. It takes a special kind of nerve, or a complete lack of intelligence, to plead for help from the very person you destroyed. But Melissa and Greg? Turns out, they had neither shame nor sense. A few days ago, I was home, enjoying a quiet weekend, when the doorbell rang, frantic, insistent. I figured it was the pizza I'd ordered, nothing out of the ordinary. But when I pulled the door open, I was met with the last person I ever expected to see. Melissa! Standing there, looking desperate. For a moment, I said nothing. I just stared. She fidgeted under my gaze, clearly waiting for me to speak. But I wouldn't give her that. She had come here uninvited. She could explain herself. And as I took her in, her frail frame, the washed-out, ill-fitting clothes, I knew exactly why she was here. Melissa had always prided herself on appearances. Even as kids, she dressed to impress. Now, though, she looked worn down, like life had chewed her up and spit her out. Her jeans were too short, her face gaunt, as if she hadn't been eating properly. And despite all that, I already knew, whatever she was about to ask, my answer was going to be a resounding no. And then, she spoke. She needed help. She and Greg had been struggling for months. He had lost his job. Instead of searching for a new one, he drowned himself in alcohol. She had tried to find work, but she'd made the mistake of giving up her career when she ran off with him. No recent job history meant rejection after rejection. Now, she had nowhere else to turn. She had heard, through relatives, of course, that our father had retired, leaving me in charge of the business. And so, she had come to ask me, to beg me, to hire Greg. To give him a job. Melissa, who had once taken everything from me, now stood before me, asking me to save her. She claimed she was sorry. That she felt guilty. That she knew I had a kind heart and would never turn her away, no matter what she had done. And just like that, she expected me to forget it all, the betrayal, the pain, the way she had rubbed it in my face for years. Her entitlement was so ridiculous, so utterly laughable, that I actually burst out laughing. "You must be joking," I told her, shaking my head. "I don't hire cheaters." And with that, I shut the door in her face. I stood there for a moment, waiting. Would she knock again? Would she cause a scene? I was ready to call the cops if she didn't get off my property. But after a long pause, she finally left. That should have been the end of it. But Melissa wasn't done. The first thing I did was call my parents to let them know. They weren't exactly shocked. In a small town like ours, news traveled fast. Some neighbors had already whispered about Melissa being back, alone, without Greg. But no one knew why. She had been in town for a week before she showed up at my door, crashing with an old high school friend. No doubt, it was that same friend who had filled her in, told her where I lived, told her about the business. And now, she was trying to milk the situation for all it was worth. A few days later, when I thought it was finally over, she made her next move. She went to our parents. She thought she had the upper hand now. That if she painted me as heartless, they would take her side. She expected sympathy. Maybe even outrage. She couldn't have been more wrong. My father shut her down instantly. "That business belongs to your sibling now. It's their decision, not mine. I'm not interfering." My mother wasn't any gentler. "You betrayed your own family," she reminded her, her voice cold and firm. "You pretended to be a friend, stole their fiancé, and then tormented them for years. And now, you think you deserve help? From the very people you hurt?" Melissa tried to defend herself, her voice shaky. "It was all in the—" But she never finished that sentence. Because even she knew there was no excuse that could ever make up for what she did. And this time, no one was going to save her. My stepsister had always believed she was destined for more. But when my parents told her she was no longer welcome, she lost control. She stormed into their home, furious, throwing accusations like daggers. "You've always favored her," she screamed, her voice trembling with resentment. "You treated her like the golden child while I was nothing more than a burden." Her words stung the air, heavy with years of pent-up frustration. She turned to my father, her face contorted with rage and pain. "You are my father. Flesh and blood. But you acted as if she was your only daughter." He didn't flinch. His response was calm, unwavering. "I've given you more chances than any other parent would have. And yet, here we are." But that didn't satisfy her. She pointed at me, seething. "She has everything that was supposed to be mine. The business, the life, the respect." Then, as if to justify her actions, she spat out, "It's not even my fault that Greg chose me over her. I didn't make him fall for me. But somehow, I'm the one being punished." She insisted the postcards she had sent me weren't meant to taunt. They were, in her words, a genuine apology. But ever since my father relayed her words, they had haunted me. Was there truth in them? Was she really meant to stand where I do now? Perhaps. But the truth remains, she lost that future because of her own actions. I never told my father to cut her out or hand the business to me. He did that on his own, a choice he made willingly. It's unfair for her to place the blame on me. And as for being the so-called golden child, that was never the case. But I can understand why she might believe it. In her mind, she was sent away because of me. Because I spoke out. Because I couldn't take the endless bullying anymore. A parent deciding to send their child away, it's not something that happens lightly. I know it weighed on my father. But what choice did he have? If he hadn't taken action, who knows what kind of person Melissa would have become. The way she was heading, she might have ended up behind bars. And those postcards? I don't believe for a second that they were sincere. Maybe she told herself they were, but in reality, they felt more like an attempt to rewrite history, to cover up the truth. Still, a part of me pities her. Her husband, Greg, the man she threw everything away for, turned out to be nothing more than a disappointment. Now she's stuck cleaning up his mess, coming to me of all people for help. That alone must have been humiliating for her. And maybe I should have been kinder, should have shown more compassion. Because at the end of the day, I have everything, and she has nothing. And yet, even as I feel sorry for her, I can't bring myself to help. Not with a job. Not with money. Nothing. The most I can offer is sympathy, and even that feels like more than she deserves. I won't pretend this doesn't make me feel uneasy. Maybe it's the things she said about me being privileged, about taking what was hers. Or maybe it's something deeper. Imposter syndrome, guilt, I don't know. But I do know this, I am not responsible for her downfall. Am I wrong for refusing to help the person who betrayed me? For turning my back on the man who abandoned me? Because as much as I pity them, I can't erase what they did. Update 1. I thought turning to others would bring me clarity. Instead, the opinions were split. Some said I was justified in shutting them out. Others argued that I had always been the favored one, that my so-called privilege had pushed Melissa over the edge. It left me more confused than before. So, I did what I always do when faced with uncertainty. I went to my parents. They were the ones who had seen it all unfold. They had watched Melissa's descent long before I understood it myself. My father, ever the voice of reason, assured me there was nothing to feel guilty about. We tried, he said. We went above and beyond to help her become a better person. But at the end of the day, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. He admitted something I had always known deep down. Had Melissa been different, had she shown responsibility and respect, the business would have been hers. But she didn't. She made her choices, and those choices had consequences. His words lifted a weight off my shoulders. I had spent too much time carrying guilt that wasn't mine to bear. And I made a promise to myself I wouldn't let it consume me anymore. Update 2. It had been a week since Melissa's visit. Silence had followed. I had almost convinced myself that she had left, returning to California with Greg. But then, today, she shattered that illusion. She showed up at my workplace. Unannounced. Unhinged. She knew the building well. After all, she had spent her childhood running through its halls, just as I had. That familiarity made it easy for her to slip past security, unnoticed, undeterred. And then, just like that, she was inside. And she was ready to make a scene. She stormed into the office like a whirlwind, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. Standing right in front of my door, she let out a furious tirade, accusing me of stealing what was rightfully hers. She claimed I had manipulated our parents, playing the obedient daughter, bowing and scraping just enough to win their approval. In her mind, I had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to turn them against her, painting her as the villain while I stood there looking like the perfect child. Melissa's voice rose with every word, seething with years of resentment. According to her, I had twisted the truth about her bullying, convincing everyone that she was the problem. I had even pushed our father into sending her to rehab, all so I could secure my position as the golden child and take over the business that was meant for her. But the worst offense? She believed I had never forgiven her for Greg choosing her instead of me. That, she screamed, was the real reason I refused to let her be part of the company now. I couldn't stand to be overlooked, and when Greg picked her, I lost my mind and set out to ruin her life. The moment I heard the commotion, I knew it had to be her. I called security before stepping out to face the chaos. She saw me and doubled down, spewing her fury for all to hear. I tried to tell her to stop, but she refused. Her anger fueled her, stretching her rant into agonizing minutes before security finally removed her from the premises. Still shaken, I called my father. I wanted his advice before taking further action, but the moment he heard what happened, his patience snapped. He was done. He told me to go ahead and call the cops. And so I did. When the police arrived, she was still lurking outside. Was she waiting for me to leave? Planning to yell at me again? Or worse, was she thinking about attacking me? The thought chilled me. The officers didn't waste any time. They arrested her on the spot for trespassing and disturbing the peace. Minor charges, sure, she'd likely get off with a fine or maybe community service. But it would go on her record. That stain wouldn't be easy to erase. I called my dad again, expecting maybe a hint of regret. Maybe a sigh, a pause, some hesitation. But there was none. He only sounded exhausted. I just want a break from this, he muttered. I felt for him. Having a daughter like Melissa couldn't be easy. She blamed him for everything wrong in her life, even when it was her own fault. We had all been more patient than she deserved. Update 3. For the first time in a long while, there was silence. No calls, no texts, no sudden outbursts. Melissa was gone. At first, we weren't sure, but my dad asked around and got confirmation someone had spotted her at the airport. The thought was both shocking and relieving. After everything, she was finally leaving. I had braced myself for another explosion, some dramatic last-ditch attempt to get our attention, but instead, she vanished without a fight. And honestly, I was relieved. The fear of what she might do next had been weighing on me. Would she try to destroy my reputation? Would she come back with Greg, both of them more desperate than before? Now, at least, there was peace. I didn't know what she would do next. Her situation with Greg was a mess, and with no one else willing to help, they were on their own. I wasn't holding my breath for some grand redemption arc, but I did hope she figured something out. Not for her sake. For mine. Because if she couldn't find a way to fix her life, she would just come back, knocking on my door, dragging Greg along, begging, demanding, causing more chaos. I didn't want that. So I hoped, for entirely selfish reasons, that she and Greg found jobs, found stability, anything to keep them far away from me. For now, though, I could finally breathe. For the first time in what felt like forever, the nightmare was over. At least for now.